So I'm a huge friggin' PvE nerd. I'm ridiculous. Raiding is my favorite thing. I could do it basically forever. And in my opinion, when it comes to just pure PvE encounters, you can't really beat Wildstar. If you've never played it, Wildstars, the weird sci-fi western space opera game MMORPG thing that involves tiny gerbilmen with giant laser cannons blowing up tree people in a weird cartoony sci-fi world. It also remains my #1 favorite MMORPG on the market today. And I've said that a lot of times, but I've also talked about a lot of the problems it has, and it has problems, otherwise it would be a much bigger MMORPG than it is right now. But why is it my favorite MMORPG of all time on the market today? Well, there's a very good reason for that. It's because on a scale of 1 to 10, Wildstar's dungeons and raids are in the low hundreds. They are some of the most intense, engaging, and fun PvE encounters I have ever experienced in an MMORPG, and I'm including Burning Crusade in that. And you know how much I love Burning Crusade. Look at all my other videos where I talk about how Burning Crusade was like the second coming of MMORPG Jesus. This video is mostly going to focus on Wildstar dungeons, but Wildstar's raids follow a lot of the same philosophies, which make them friggin' awesome. Back in the day, Stephen Frost, who was one of the content designers on Wildstar, described its raiding in a kind of subtle terms.
For those who aren't hardcore, because they're hardcore.
He really liked that word. So Wildstar dungeons are this very interesting blending of old and new. A lot of the structure feels very similar to a lot of former MMORPGs before it, but Wildstar's rather interesting combat system allows for an incredible amount of variety and just interesting combat design. Imagine a boss fight from your favorite MMORPG on the planet right now. How it does a lot of things. There's a lot of mechanics, there's a lot of stuff going on, whether it's Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Skyforge, some other MMORPG. The bosses generally have a mechanical structure, a dance, or some sort of, strategy to take them down. Wildstar's telegraph system allows the game to convey information to the player directly, immediately, and clearly. If there's red, probably shouldn't stand in it. Not to mention there are structures within the game like CC breaks and interrupts for bonus damage. There is a lot going on in Wildstar's combat system, but it's all incredibly intuitive. It's right there in front of you. It's very easy to react, it's very easy to act, exploit advantages, etc. This system allows for a lot of interesting mix-ups during the leveling content when you're just fighting one enemy as one player. There's some advantages you can take. Telegraphs allow for some interesting abilities. You can interrupt. It's all kind of there, but it doesn't really reach its full potential until you reach 5-man or 20-man raiding. Once you've entered 5-man dungeon land, Wildstar has decided that it can throw whatever the hell it feels like at you, and that includes, in some cases, the kitchen sink. Now, all of this might come off that I'm saying that Wildstar is inherently difficult, and yes, compared to most other MMORPGs on the market, Wildstar is probably a little bit more of a challenge, but it does challenge right. In Wildstar, knowing how an encounter works will pay many more dividends than most other MMORPGs. Because in Wildstar, bosses mostly do their damage by punishing the players, but players can also punish the boss. Most of this comes from Wildstar's stun mechanic. Most bosses have interrupt armor. They're either immune to interrupts, or they can take a certain number of interrupts before they actually get stunned. A lot of the time, bosses will become vulnerable to interrupts during big, crazy attacks, which the party can exploit if they're quick enough and coordinated enough. Sometimes you have to interrupt the boss 4, 5, even 6 times in a regular dungeon before you can pull this off. But if you do, you're rewarded with a couple of seconds of extra damage, and you stop that crazy ability from going off, so, people didn't die. This usually only works in certain situations, though. Like, the final boss of Kelvorth is still going to have his delicious pizza phase. In that, Wildstar's difficulty comes much more from learning the encounters than it does from actually executing them. Once you understand a lot of the Wildstar encounters, they become much easier, so long as you've got the gear for them. A good example of this is the second boss of Kelvorth. Knowing where to move when he attaches a tracker beacon to you, which causes suicide drones to start chasing you, which need to be destroyed by the rest of the party, or else the suicide drones will explode on that player, is going to make it a lot easier to deal with. Having CC breaks and being able to sprint or teleport is also a big deal. Going into the fight with these tools on your tool belt is going to make the encounter that much easier. Also, knowing that you can interrupt one of his abilities during his third phase to give you a little bit of extra damage is also a huge deal, because that ability is a party wiping attack. To that end, I don't think Wildstar is actually terribly overtly difficult. It's certainly more difficult than most MMORPGs on the market these days, but that's simply because it has a higher learning curve. But it's a learning curve that is extremely rewarding, one that welcomes you into a complex system that is clearly laid out to the player throughout combat. An apt comparison might be Dark Souls. While it's certainly a niche title, and at no point will I ever say that Wildstar has got some global appeal, but they're both difficult. They both require learning. They both require patience and understanding and eventual mastery of their systems. Although there's a problem here. Walking into dungeons that require so much knowledge of both the combat system at hand and the dungeon itself can be a massive punch to the gut. I mean, like, one minute you're like walking around killing enemies with your mind swords, and then a minute later you're stuck in some dungeon with a monster 30 times your size stomping all over your face. Carbine kind of saw this. After the launch of Wildstar, initially people were sort of avoiding dungeons a little bit because there is such a massive difficulty spike even between adventures and dungeons. You just get your ass kicked really hard by these dungeon bosses because they are designed to be crazy challenging. So instead of nerf everything and compromise all the content, Carbine decided to do something awesome. They created probably the smartest dungeon I've ever been in. They created the Proto Games Academy. For those of you who've never reached level 10 in Wildstar, the Proto Games Academy is a single dungeon which teaches you everything you will ever need to know to play almost all of Wildstar's PvE. Each of the 7 bosses focuses on different areas of Wildstar's incredibly intricate combat system, from interrupts to avoiding red to controlling ads to DPS races, all the way up to using basic mechanics, and finishes it all off with a giant final exam against something that actually does resemble one of the crazy dungeon bosses you'll be seeing later on in your adventure. And while this dungeon does provide you hints as you go, little voice barks that tell you how to overcome certain mechanics or encounters, or little tip bubbles that provide you information on your classes, it spends almost all of its time teaching you by doing. Jump in, get your ass kicked, repeat until you understand. And it's not really that difficult. Most groups do get through it on their first try. But it does ingrain that knowledge and that confidence in you to take on bigger and badder bad guys. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with a combat system that communicates all of the required information to the player directly, visually, and quickly, that uses this information to allow the players to punish the bosses when they get the opportunity and avoid being punished by the bosses when they mess up. And it gives the player the opportunity to learn all of this by doing through a rather brilliant tutorial-style dungeon. With all of this in mind, Carbine was finally free to make, well...
It interrupts.
I killed 2 interrupts.
I used all mine.
Fuck.
Woo! Less than 40k, come on guys!
God, no, God, shit. Immediately, and then the fire starts coming. And the tank has 10 hit points! As you say that, something targets you.
Like a little bit over the top. And those are just the dungeon bosses. The raid bosses push this creativity to its extremes with some really, truly insane fights. So why do I love Wildstar dungeons and raids? And why are those dungeons and raids so good that I still consider Wildstar my favorite MMORPG? Well, it's because of the creativity. Everything that Wildstar does to teach the player, to indicate to the player, to telegraph to the player, allows them to be more creative because of it. The clearer a combat system is to a player, the clearer you can indicate danger, or safety, or mechanics, the more intricate those mechanics can become. This allows developers to be more creative with how they approach encounters, how they approach dungeons, how they approach trash even. Everything can be more interesting when there's more options available. And the clearer the fights, the more options, from roiling walls of fire coming directly at you, to crazy firestorms of explosions, to just abject madness. If it's all clear, it's not random weirdness, it's actually kind of fun. It gives the fights a very interesting feel, a very over-the-top feel. And that's what Wildstar does best. It's a game that's just quite simply over the top. I mean, its level up has a guitar solo. I have this thought that wanting more of something isn't necessarily a complaint. There are situations where a game just simply isn't worth the money. I don't think that's necessarily true of Wildstar. I want to see more of this kind of crazy stuff, and I feel like that's the way that Wildstar can be best, to embrace this PvE and make it the core of Wildstar's entire philosophy, to keep churning out content that is so crazy, over the top, and fun, because the amount of freedom and creativity afforded to these people is insane, just through merit of its combat system. A combat system that was brilliantly designed. An MMORPG player's combat system. It would be really a shame if it were squandered in the end. But so far, it hasn't been. And I hope to see more over-the-top madness from Wildstar in the future. Holy crap, a Wildstar video? I haven't made one of these in a long time. Thank you very much for watching this video on Wildstar Dungeons and why I find them adorably hilarious fun. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, all of that YouTube stuff. I had a really fun time putting this one together because it got me reacquainted with Wildstar and all the fun you can have with that game. And Wildstar has been a game I haven't really played much because I don't have that many people playing it right now. But yeah, thank you again for watching. It means a lot to me that you guys are watching and enjoying these videos because I love to make them. And you all continue to have a great one.